Welcome back to Echo of Fears, the place where nightmares breathe and true horror never sleeps. They say the desert never forgets. Every scream, every secret, every soul that vanished in the heat. The earth remembers it all. Tonight, we're diving deep into Arizona's most haunted small towns, places where reality cracks and something else seeps through. From ghost-ridden highways and disappearing towns to whispers buried beneath the sand, these aren't legends. They're real stories, told by the ones who survived. Stay till the end, because story number 8 isn't just terrifying, it's still happening. Story 1. The Whispers of Red Hollow. They say the desert doesn't forget. It just waits, quiet, patient, until someone comes close enough to listen. In Arizona's heartland, beyond the comfort of paved roads and cell towers, there's a stretch of earth that locals don't map anymore. The wind there feels different. It doesn't move, it watches. The air carries a dry taste, like something burned long ago and never fully gone. Most travelers pass through without noticing. But those who stop, even for a moment, talk about the silence. Not the ordinary kind, but the kind that feels aware. The kind that presses against your skin like it's listening to your heartbeat. That's where the story of Red Hollow begins. Not in history books, not in police files, but in a piece of footage that was never meant to be found. It was discovered by a park ranger after a dust storm. A cracked GoPro half buried in red sand near the forgotten foothills of the Superstition Mountains. The casing was sun-bleached, the battery corroded. It looked like it had been there for years. But the timestamp told another story. It was recorded only 2 days earlier. The video opens with a man, mid-30s, backpack slung over his shoulder, hiking alone. His voice is casual, almost cheerful, narrating his route through the old mining trails. You can hear the dry crunch beneath his boots, the distant hum of desert heat, the kind of loneliness that only exists miles away from anything alive. For the first few minutes, it's ordinary. Just another adventure vlog until something interrupts. A sound, metal on stone, rhythmic, steady, too deliberate to be the wind. The hiker stops, tilts his head. You can hear it clearly. A hollow clang echoing from somewhere behind the ridge. Then again, then again. He whispers, "Is someone out here?" Silence. Then, after a pause, he mutters something about the old Red Hollow mine, the one that collapsed in 1949, sealing 27 miners inside. Locals say no one ever recovered the bodies. The entrances were locked, the shafts buried, and the town emptied overnight. He keeps walking. The sun dips behind the rocks, and the light changes. You can almost feel it through the lens, the cold shift in the air, the way the desert forgets warmth once night falls. Hours later, the footage cuts. When it comes back, it's pitch black. His flashlight is trembling in his hand, the beam slicing through the dark. He's muttering about losing the trail, his GPS failing. His breathing quickens. He says the compass needle won't stop spinning. Then, it returns. That metallic clang. Only this time it's close enough to rattle the mic. You can hear it echoing, not in open air, but underground. Followed by faint voices, dozens of them, layered, low. They aren't calling for help. They're talking, repeating something under their breath. He calls out, "Hello?" And then, everything stops. No wind, no static. Just silence so deep it sounds like the desert itself stopped breathing. Then, one voice answers. Slow, uneven, like someone speaking through a wall of earth. The camera jerks. The light flickers across a rusted sign, half buried in dust and sand. You can just make out the words, Red Hollow Mining Company. The recording ends there. No scream, no struggle. Just static that runs for 6 more hours. When rescuers found the GoPro wedged between 2 rocks near the sealed mine entrance, there was no sign of the hiker. His car was still at the trailhead, his tent untouched. But when technicians ran a deeper analysis of the audio, filtering out the wind, the static, the interference, they uncovered something underneath. Not a glitch, not an echo, a voice, faint, buried beneath the noise, repeating the same phrase over and over again. We're still down here. And the strangest part, each voice spoke at a slightly different time, as if they weren't all saying it together, but answering. Story 2. The motel that checked itself out. On the outskirts of Kingman, Arizona, where Route 66 begins to fade into sand and silence, there's a mile-long stretch of highway that almost everyone passes, but no one talks about. Truckers call it the Dead Mile, a place where radio stations turn to static, GPS flickers out, and headlights seem to dim for no reason at all. If you drive it late enough, between midnight and 3, you'll see it. A glow on the horizon. At first, it looks like heat lightning or maybe the reflection of a passing car. But as you get closer, the light sharpens into letters, flickering, uneven, humming through the still desert air. The Silver Sun Motel. That's what the sign says. Bright, blue-white tubes of neon curling against the black sky, blinking just slow enough to catch your attention, just fast enough to make your stomach tighten. But here's the thing. The Silver Sun Motel doesn't exist anymore. It hasn't for almost 40 years. The property was condemned in 1987 after a series of disappearances that no one ever solved. The lot was fenced off, power lines cut, and the entire structure left to rot in the desert heat. The state filed records showing it was demolished in 1992. But the light, that impossible blue glow, still appears. And sometimes, people stop to see for themselves. The first report came from a truck driver named Ray Collins, a veteran hauler with 2 decades of cross-country runs. It was just after 2 a.m. when he saw the sign, standing bright at the edge of the highway. He pulled over, expecting maybe a new business had taken over the property. What he found instead didn't make sense. The parking lot was lit up like it was still 1976. Sodium lamps buzzing, office lights glowing behind lace curtains. Every window shimmered faintly, as if the rooms were still being used. But there wasn't a single car in the lot. Not a sound, except the low electric hum from the sign. He parked his rig and stepped out. Desert wind brushed against him, warm, dry, carrying the faint scent of burnt oil. The gravel crunched under his boots as he walked toward the office door, which stood slightly ajar. Inside, the bell above it rang softly as he entered, like someone had just left. The air was stale, but not dead. Dust covered the counter, but the fan above it turned slowly, as if trying to stir life into a place long abandoned. The lights worked. The vending machine in the corner glowed faint red. There was even a faint hum from the coffee maker behind the desk. Ray called out. No answer. He rang the bell on the counter. Still nothing. Then he saw it, the guest ledger. A thick, faded book open on the desk. Dozens of signatures filled the last few pages. All written in different handwriting, all dated in recent months. Ray's hand hovered over the paper, his breath catching when he noticed one name scrawled across the latest line. R. Collins, 2:13 a.m. His own name, his own handwriting, written in ink that hadn't yet dried. He backed away from the counter, knocking over a brochure rack as he stumbled toward the door. Outside, every light in the motel began flickering, not at once, but in sequence, room by room, like something unseen was moving through the halls, turning them off one at a time. Ray sprinted for his truck. As he slammed the door and looked back, the entire motel went dark, every light extinguished, every sound gone. The neon sign was the last to fade, one letter at a time, until only the faint outline of S-U-N remained glowing in the distance. Then nothing. He drove straight through to the next town, shaking, eyes wide, refusing to stop for fuel until daylight. When he reported what happened, police went out to investigate. They found the lot exactly where he said, fenced, boarded, untouched. No lights, no wiring, no generator, no trace of power of any kind. And yet, when they stepped inside the main office, the old guest ledger was still there, still open. And the last entry was exactly as Ray described it. Locals say if you pass that stretch of Route 66 at 2:13 in the morning, you can still see the glow. Sometimes it's faint. Sometimes it's bright enough to paint the desert in blue. And if you look closely, for just a second, you might swear you see movement inside the windows, like a figure walking through the halls, checking rooms that haven't existed for decades, a motel that somehow never stopped running, even after it checked itself out. Story 3. The Children of Dry Creek. If you drive 30 miles east of Yuma, you'll come across a dirt road that doesn't appear on any modern map. Locals call it the Dry Creek Road, though there hasn't been a drop of water there in almost a century. The road winds through open desert, flat and endless, until it stops at what looks like nothing. Just a hollow stretch of land and a few jagged beams of rotted wood sticking out of the earth. That's what's left of Dry Creek, Arizona. A town that existed for barely 20 years before nature wiped it away. Nothing grows there anymore. The soil is white and cracked like bone. The air hums faintly as though it remembers sounds that the living forgot. People say if you stand there at sunset, you can feel the temperature drop without a cloud in the sky, like something cold moves just beneath the sand. That's where the schoolhouse stood, and that's where the laughter came from. In 2021, a group of 4 urban explorers, friends from Tucson, set out to document forgotten settlements along the old Colorado floodplain. They'd done this a dozen times before. Old motels, mines, cemeteries. But Dry Creek was different. It was barely marked, only mentioned in a few local archives as a former agricultural site destroyed by natural flooding. They arrived at noon. The footage from their camera shows the schoolhouse in pieces, 2 standing walls, a collapsed roof, and a rusted swing set, tilted in the sand. One of them jokes about how eerie it feels, another about how quiet it is. But in the distance, you can hear something faint. Wind moving through the hollow boards. As the sun drops lower, the mood shifts. They find small objects half buried near the school steps. A shoe, a tin lunchbox, a wooden ruler cracked in half. Things left behind by someone small, long ago. When one of them lifts the lunchbox, the camera catches something odd. Tiny prints in the dust, scattered around the base of the steps. Not animal tracks, handprints. The group pauses. They're uneasy but keep filming, brushing it off as marks made by wind or insects. Inside, they find remnants of desks, rusted metal legs sticking out of dirt, a half-buried chalkboard leaning against the wall. And in that moment, you can hear it. It's faint, almost part of the wind. A child's giggle. Quick, fleeting. Just enough to make one of them turn sharply toward the sound. He calls out, "Hello?" The response comes seconds later. Another laugh. This time, closer. The camera pans to the open doorway, where light flickers through the cracks in the boards. There's no one there, but you can hear the sound again. Several voices now, overlapping. It's unclear what they're saying, almost like children whispering to each other during class. They move toward the back corner, stepping over debris. One of them points out that it smells faintly like rain. Strange, considering it hasn't rained in weeks. Then, as the camera tilts toward the chalkboard, you can see something scrawled faintly across its cracked surface. At first, it looks like scratches, but when the light hits it, the words become clear. We stayed. The explorers exchange nervous laughs. One says it's a prank, maybe left by another group who came before. Another points out the way the dust has settled over the letters. It looks undisturbed, old. They start hearing the humming then, soft, steady, like children singing under their breath. The sound seems to come from beneath the floor. One of them kneels down, brushing away dust, revealing a dark cavity where the floorboards have collapsed into the foundation. He shines his flashlight down. The beam cuts through layers of dirt and wood. Nothing moves, but the sound continues. Louder now, a clear tune, faint but recognizable. The melody of "Ring Around the Rosie." He leans closer. The humming stops. For several seconds, there's silence. Only the sound of his breathing and the faint rustle of fabric. Then a small voice whispers, close to the microphone, "We can't go home." The footage cuts abruptly to static. Later that night, the group camped a few miles away, too shaken to drive back. They left their gear outside the tents. When they woke up in the morning, the camera was gone. The sand around their site was covered in small, scattered prints. 2 weeks later, a farmer discovered the camera lodged in a dry wash several miles downstream. No footprints nearby, no tire tracks, just the device half buried in silt. When the footage was recovered, most of it was corrupted. Only the audio from that last clip survived. And beneath the static, you can hear it, faint and distant. The sound of laughter carried through the wind. Dozens of voices, young, joyful, trapped. The last timestamp on the file reads March 3rd, 2:17 a.m. That was exactly 89 years to the day after the 1932 flood that destroyed the original schoolhouse. The one that took the lives of 12 children and their teacher. The Town Inn, Story 4. The Sheriff of Nowhere. Somewhere along the desert stretch between Tombstone and Bisbee, there's a mile of highway that state troopers don't patrol anymore. The map shows nothing there. No exits, no gas stations, no sign of life at all. Just a flat, endless ribbon of asphalt that hums under the sun by day and disappears under wind and sand by night. That's where the call came from. The 911 operator thought it was a prank at first, just static, crackling through the line, faint at the edge of comprehension. Then came a voice. Male. Calm. He identified himself as Sheriff Thomas Avery, badge number 2147. The problem was, That badge number had been retired in 1961, and Sheriff Thomas Avery had been dead for more than half a century. The operator froze. She checked the call ID. The system displayed Patrol Station 6. But that station didn't exist anymore. It had been swallowed by a dust storm in the mid-1960s and never rebuilt. The building was gone. The radio tower collapsed. The land had been declared unstable and sealed off. And yet, the line was open. The voice was clear. And what he said next was enough to make the dispatcher hit record. "This is Avery. I need backup. They're out here again. I've got 2 men down." Then the sound of gunfire. Then silence. The call lasted 1 minute and 48 seconds. When investigators traced the origin, they found nothing. No cell tower pings, no coordinates. Just an empty section of highway surrounded by dunes and rusted fence posts. The following morning, dispatch replayed the recording for verification. The file was gone, deleted. No log, no record, no trace of the call ever being made. Except for one thing. A handwritten note left on the operator's desk, unsigned, written in blue ink. It read, "Badge 2147 confirmed." Avast. That's how the story of the Sheriff of Nowhere began. Every year since that night, on the same date, June 9th, at the exact same time, 2:13 a.m., the 911 system registers an incoming transmission. Always the same voice, always the same badge number, always the same words. "This is Avery. I need backup. They're out here again." Technicians have tried to trace it. Some believe it's a frequency glitch, an old radio wave trapped in the atmosphere, replaying itself like an echo of time. But others have gone looking. One deputy, Eli Carter, decided to drive out there himself. He followed the coordinates logged from one of the calls, heading into the desert long after midnight. No streetlights, no traffic. Only the steady glow of his dashboard and the endless black ahead of him. He said later that the air felt strange out there, too still, like the world was holding its breath. The temperature dropped suddenly, and his radio began to hiss. Then came a faint voice through the static. It was the same message, word for word. But this time, it ended differently. "Carter, you shouldn't be here." He stopped the car, turned off the lights, and that's when he saw it. The outline of a building in the distance, faint under the starlight, half buried in sand. He walked closer. The closer he got, the colder the air became, until his breath started to fog. The building was real, or at least, it looked real. The old Tombstone County Patrol Station 6, still standing where it shouldn't be. Inside, everything was frozen in time. Desks, radios, filing cabinets, even a coffee mug half filled with sand. The clock on the wall was stopped at 2:13. Eli turned on his flashlight and swept it across the main desk. That's when he saw it. A carving in the wood, scratched deep into the surface. It wasn't old. The edges were fresh, the dust pushed aside. His own name. Carter. He stumbled back, heart pounding, and the radio on his shoulder crackled to life. It was the same voice. "We've got 2 men down. Carter, do you copy?" The sound faded with the wind. When Eli turned around, the building was gone, replaced by open sand and a torn highway sign half buried in the dirt. He drove straight back to headquarters. The dash cam showed nothing but darkness and dust. When the system techs checked the GPS log, It showed his car stationary for exactly 1 minute and 48 seconds, the same length as the original call. A week later, the 911 recordings from all previous years vanished from the archives. Every single file connected to the incident, gone. But one line remains in the analog dispatch book, written in faded ink. 2147. Backup requested. Then every year, on June 9th, at exactly 2:13 a.m., the call comes in again. Same voice, same badge number, same request. Some say it's a recording stuck in an atmospheric loop. Others believe it's a man still trapped in the moment he died, repeating the call until someone finally answers. But no one ever does. Because out there on that forgotten stretch of highway, there's no one left to send, just the wind, the sand, and a vow. Story 5. The Woman in the Window. They say every desert town has something the maps forgot to mention, something left behind in the wind, in the dust, in the quiet corners no one looks at for too long. In Coyote Wells, that something lives behind a single window. It's not a ghost story the locals tell anymore. It's one they try to avoid. Because if you ask about the old post office at the edge of town, they'll stop talking. Their eyes shift, their voices lower. And if you push too far, someone will eventually whisper, "You don't want to see her." No one says her name first. No one ever says it first. But they all know exactly who you're talking about. The pale woman who stares from the second window on the left. The one that faces the highway that doesn't go anywhere anymore. At night, when the air cools and the sand starts to move across the road, you can hear the metal sign of the old post office tapping against its hinges. Slow, uneven, like someone knocking to be let in. And if you're unlucky enough to look up at that window during one of those nights, you'll see her. Not moving, not blinking, just there. A thin figure behind the glass, skin almost colorless under the moonlight, hair that doesn't quite move with the wind, and eyes that don't seem to follow you. But you'll feel them long after you've looked away. The first recorded sighting was in 1953. A family traveling Route 71 stopped in town for gas and decided to take a few photographs. One of the abandoned post office, its faded U.S. mail sign still hanging above the door. When the pictures were developed, a face appeared in the second window. A woman's face, clear, expressionless, pressed against the glass. Her features too sharp, her eyes too still. The family swore the building had been empty. They'd looked inside. There was nothing. The sheriff at the time brushed it off as a trick of the light. But then the same thing happened again. And again. Different travelers, different years, same window. The same face. Long before that, in the winter of 1918, the town of Coyote Wells wasn't abandoned. It was alive. Farmers, traders, families, people who built their homes out of heat and hope. When the influenza hit, the small hospital filled up in a matter of days. They had no choice but to turn the post office into a makeshift ward. They cleared the mailbags, pushed the sorting tables aside, and brought in the sick. Dozens of them, men, women, children. And in the middle of it all was a nurse named Margaret Ellison. She wasn't from town, just passing through when the outbreak began. She stayed when others ran. She wrote letters for the dying when they could no longer hold a pen. She covered their eyes when they stopped breathing. And when her own fever came, she didn't tell anyone. By the time the others noticed, she was gone. Her name entered in the town ledger, her grave marked below. For decades, that word, below, didn't mean anything to anyone. Until 1987. A group of university historians came to document old buildings in the area. One of them, a woman named Clara Jameson, took special interest in the post office. She found it strange that there was no record of the building ever being demolished, but several notes about preserving the basement. She and her team pried open the back door, stepped inside, and found the floorboards warped, dust thick as ash. On the far wall, beneath the window, they discovered a narrow trap door sealed with nails and rope. They opened it, and inside, beneath 6 inches of packed earth, they found a set of human remains, still wearing a nurse's uniform. Pinned to the collar was a small metal tag, M. Ellison. The story made local news. For a few weeks, people came to see the building again, drawn by curiosity, by fear, by that strange pull old mysteries have. And for a short time, it seemed like the story had finally ended. They buried her properly in the town cemetery. They said prayers. They closed the post office for good. But that summer, a man driving through at midnight stopped for water and decided to take a picture of the boarded-up building, a kind of souvenir of the town's ghost stories. When he developed the photo, he noticed something odd. Even though the window was covered in plywood, there was a faint reflection. And in that reflection, a woman's outline, standing exactly where the window used to be. Since then, strange things have followed. Security cameras from nearby gas stations capture faint flashes of movement near the building. People claim their phones glitch when they point toward it, freezing, then showing a blurred figure in white for a single frame. A local hiker once said she saw the woman's reflection in her car window as she passed, even though the post office was miles behind her. The town council eventually decided to seal the building entirely. They bolted iron plates over the windows, poured concrete into the basement, and fenced off the lot. But the sightings. Story 6. The church beneath the sand. In the heart of the Sonoran Desert, where the wind never stops moving and the dunes change shape with every passing season, there is a place the locals call El Silencio. The silence. No one builds there. No one camps there. Because every few years, when the storms roll through and the sand lifts high enough to blot out the sun, something strange happens. The land moves, and something old surfaces. Something that was never meant to be found. It began after a storm unlike any they'd seen in decades. 3 days of wind that stripped paint from cars and erased entire road signs. When the air finally cleared, a team of surveyors noticed something jutting from the dunes. A shape, hard and symmetrical, half buried in gold dust. At first, they thought it was a ruin, maybe a remnant of a mission long lost to time. But when archaeologists arrived, they realized this wasn't a ruin. It was a church, a Spanish mission, perfectly preserved, sealed beneath 15 feet of compacted sand. The roof intact, the bell tower standing, and a wooden door that looked as though it had been closed only yesterday. They called it La Misión de Santa Esperanza. No records of it existed. No maps marked it. Yet, in nearby towns, there were whispers. Stories passed down by grandparents who refused to speak of what happened there. They said there was once a mission that vanished overnight. A congregation of 37 souls who went to Mass one evening and never came back. When the search parties arrived, all they found was sand. Smooth, unbroken, as if the desert had swallowed the church whole. Now, centuries later, it had returned. The team entered carefully, stepping through the old wooden doorway into air that hadn't been touched since the 1700s. Inside, they found pews still standing in neat rows, the altar polished, the tapestries untouched. Dust hung in the air like breath frozen in time. And then they saw the candles. Each one stood upright on the altar rail, thick, white, and burned down halfway. Their wax still soft to the touch. But there was no heat, no smoke, just the faint scent of wax and something older. Something like incense and salt. Dr. Alvarez, the lead archaeologist, described the place as impossible. No oxygen should have kept the wood from rotting. No structure could have survived that long, buried under that weight of sand. But everything, every detail, was intact. As they explored, they found strange carvings in the walls, spirals of Latin prayers, all ending with the same phrase, in terra non amplius, roughly translated, no longer of this earth. One of the team members, a young researcher named Karina, noticed something else. Each pew had a rosary draped neatly across it. 37 in total. One for every person said to have vanished, and none of the beads were covered in dust. When the team reached the altar, they found a single golden cross resting at the center. It was ornate, heavy, decorated with red stones that caught the faint light from their lamps. Karina reached out and lifted it. The moment she did, something shifted. Faint at first, like the sound of air escaping from a sealed jar. Then they heard it, a soft trickle. Sand. It began to fall from the cracks in the ceiling, running down the stone like water through fingers. The walls groaned, deep, hollow, as if something enormous was breathing beneath them. Dr. Alvarez shouted for the team to move. But before they could reach the doorway, the ground tilted. The pews slid toward the altar. The air grew heavy, and the sand came pouring in. They scrambled for the exit, blinded by dust, their lights cutting through waves of brown and gold. Karina dropped the cross, but it was too late. The entryway collapsed behind them. When rescuers arrived 2 days later, they found only one of the archaeologists, unconscious, dehydrated, lying on the open sand. There was no sign of the mission, no rubble, no structure, just dunes, smooth as silk. Weeks later, when authorities searched through the equipment that had been recovered, they found one camera intact. It contained a single photograph, a shot of the interior, the altar, the pews, the faint light cutting through the cracks in the ceiling. And standing at the back of the church, near the doorway, was a row of figures. Dozens of them. Still, facing the altar, each holding a rosary. Experts said it was a trick of the light, overlapping exposures, dust distortion. But those who saw the original print said otherwise. The faces weren't blurred. They were detailed, eyes closed, heads bowed, waiting. A month later, a new storm swept through. And once again, the sands shifted. When it cleared, the area where the church had been was unmarked. Smooth, endless, silent. As if the desert had taken back what it had briefly allowed to be seen. Today, no one knows where La Misión de Santa Esperanza lies beneath the dunes. But sometimes, after the wind changes. Story 7. the silent town of Marrow Ridge. There are places in America that disappear without a sound. Not abandoned, not destroyed, just gone. No record, no coordinates, no trace on any map. And yet, somehow people keep finding their way back to them. The story of Marrow Ridge begins with one man, a drone, and a stretch of desert that, by every satellite scan and the government survey, doesn't exist. The desert north of Phoenix is vast and unforgiving. Temperatures swing from burning daylight to frozen silence at night. No service towers, no power lines. Just endless ridges of red stone, broken tracks, and the ghost of a railroad that once carried copper out of the earth. That's where the signal cuts. Every time. Even pilots say their radios fade when they fly above it. Just a short patch of air where all sound disappears. A place people started calling the Quiet Belt. In June of last year, a drone operator named Daniel Rusk was hired to map that area for a solar development company. A routine assignment: mark terrain elevation, collect heat signatures, and capture footage. But what he found on that flight didn't match any terrain he'd ever seen before. It began with a flicker. On the drone's live feed, something sharp cut across the desert floor. Straight lines, corners, angles that didn't belong to the landscape. He tilted the camera down, and there it was. A town, an entire town. Dust-colored rooftops, a grid of narrow streets, a water tower leaning over a single main road. From above, it looked old. Maybe a mining settlement. The kind that dotted Arizona in the 19th century. But this one was whole. Windows intact, doors closed, every building standing in perfect alignment. Daniel's telemetry read 0. No name, no data, just blank coordinates. He zoomed in closer. The streets were empty. No cars, no people, no motion at all. Only one thing stood out. At the end of the road, beside a chapel, a flag moved slowly in the wind. Except there was no wind. He saved the footage and returned to base, convinced he'd discovered something extraordinary. A forgotten town, untouched by time. But when he mentioned it to locals in Phoenix, no one knew what he was talking about. An older rancher paused when he heard the coordinates. He said there was once a town out there. Marrow Ridge, founded in 1886. A copper camp that went silent after a sickness tore through it in 1901. The company shut down. The survivors left. Then the desert reclaimed it, every trace buried in sand. Daniel showed him the footage. The man went pale. He said, "That can't be. The ridge was leveled decades ago. There's nothing left." But there it was, recorded, time-stamped, undeniable. A living town where no town should be. When Daniel reviewed the video frame by frame, he noticed something else. As the drone passed over the main street, tiny bursts of light appeared inside the houses. Windows glowing, flickers in unison. One house after another. And with each flash, the drone's microphone cut out. No hum, no static, just pure, heavy silence. He played the footage on loop that night, listening through headphones. Still nothing. The drone had captured video, but no sound at all. Even the usual mechanical whine was gone, as if the desert had swallowed the noise. The next morning, Daniel decided to go there himself. He followed the coordinates through the open plains until his GPS froze. Beyond that point, His compass spun aimlessly, but he kept walking. For hours, nothing but sand and the echo of his own footsteps. No structures, no town, only flat desert. He launched the drone again, same altitude, same coordinates, expecting to see what he'd seen before. The feed came through clean, for a moment, then static, a full blackout. The camera rebooted and the town was gone. The ridge stretched flat and featureless to the horizon. He thought maybe the drone had lost its position, drifted off course. He checked his bearings. Everything matched. Still no town. He panned slowly, sweeping the desert. Then, just for an instant, the image flickered. Shadows appeared. Rooftops, a water tower, the faint shimmer of windows. And then nothing. Gone again. When Daniel returned home, he tried to extract the footage. All the files were corrupted except for one. The last frame before the feed cut completely. In that frame, the drone's lens reflected the world below it. The operator's outline, the sky, the pale ground. And in the reflection, behind Daniel's shape, a face. Small, round, a child's face staring upward, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. No dust, no blur, just stillness. Technicians who analyzed the file confirmed that the reflection didn't align with the drone's surroundings. There was nothing nearby to produce it. No structures, no people, just open desert. The company shut the project down. Daniel's report was filed under equipment malfunction. But a few weeks later, hikers exploring that same region began to share strange experiences online. Story 8. The Thing in Black Canyon. There are places in Arizona where the darkness feels heavier, where the air seems to listen, and the silence doesn't mean you're alone. The Black Canyon Trail is one of those places. It stretches more than 80 miles through the desert north of Phoenix, winding through canyons, dry riverbeds, and miles of rock where even the moonlight struggles to reach. Hikers call it beautiful. Locals call it different, because out there sound travels in strange ways. Voices echo from nowhere. Footsteps repeat themselves after you stop walking. And sometimes, people swear they hear someone calling their name, even when they're alone. For most, it's just the wind. But for a group of campers in the spring of 2021, it wasn't. They were experienced. 4 friends from Flagstaff, used to hiking and night camping. They set up camp near mile marker 42, deep in the canyon where the trail narrows between 2 high ridges. The weather was calm. The first night was uneventful. But on the second night, things began to change. Around midnight, one of them, a man named Cole, woke up to the sound of footsteps just beyond the campfire's light. Slow, dragging, not the rhythmic stride of an animal. Something deliberate, something watching. He whispered to his friend Aaron, who grabbed a flashlight and scanned the rocks. Nothing. But as the beam cut across the scrub, they heard something else, a sound like whispering. Soft, broken words they couldn't quite make out. Then, clear as a bell, a voice called out from the dark. "Cole, you awake?" It was Aaron's voice. But Aaron was standing right next to him. The flashlight froze on a patch of brush 50 feet away. The sound came again, this time from the opposite direction. The same voice, same tone. "Cole, come here." Aaron swung the light back, but the brush was empty. No movement, no reflection, just the quiet hiss of the wind between the rocks. They stayed awake until dawn, too frightened to sleep, too uncertain to leave. In the morning, they found fresh prints in the dust around the edge of their camp, hands and feet pressed deep into the sand, as if something had been crawling on all fours. That day, they decided to pack up and leave early. But before they reached the trailhead, Aaron's GoPro picked up something none of them saw at the time. As the camera panned across a ridge, a shape moved along the horizon. Bent low, pale in the sun, moving with quick, unnatural precision. Too fast for a person, too long-limbed for an animal. It seemed to run, then stop suddenly, its head turning toward the camera before vanishing behind a rock face. When they reviewed the footage later, they could see it clearly. Arms and legs, human-shaped, but wrong. Joints bending just slightly the opposite way. That night, back in town, Cole couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed them home. He kept hearing knocking outside his window. 3 taps, always 3, and always after midnight. The next weekend, he returned to the canyon, alone. He said he wanted proof. He left messages in a group chat before he went silent. Found the trail. Something's moving out here. And the last one, it sounds like me. He was never found. 3 days later, search teams entered the canyon. They found his tent torn open, camera smashed, and drag marks leading toward the cliffs. On the 3rd day of the search, rescuers reported hearing a voice echoing across the rock walls. A man's voice, calling for help, calling by name. "Cole, over here." But when they traced the sound, it moved. It came from above them, and then behind, then from the opposite ridge. The radio logs that day captured one of the rescuers saying quietly, "That's not him. That's not him." After that, the search ended. No one volunteered to go back. The case remains open. Missing person, unknown cause. Since then, hikers in that area have reported strange things. Voices in the wind, footsteps that stop when they stop, and a shape seen in the distance, crawling low across the canyon floor before standing up, just long enough to be mistaken for a person. Locals still talk about the old legends of skinwalkers, shapeshifters that wear the faces of the living. But the elders in that region say whatever this is, it doesn't belong to any of those stories. It's older, quieter, something that doesn't want to be known. Last year, a group of campers passing through the same area at dusk caught audio of what they thought was an owl, until they slowed it down. In the middle of the echo, beneath the cry, a voice whispers 2 words: "Help me." No one can explain how a voice can mimic a man perfectly. No one can explain how it moves faster than any human could, or why the wind in Black Canyon sometimes carries laughter where there should be none. All that's left of Cole is a single, corrupted video file. 15 seconds of shaky night vision footage. A pair of eyes glowing in the dark, a shape crawling toward.